community. Now, Kamaini has already set the stage, really, for us to begin to reflect on what role our stories play in our lives. What I want to shift now to is all these stories that are all around us. Um, they talk to us, and we talk to them, and that is how this movement from the unconscious and the collective unconscious to the experiential world around us happens. But when you are specifically undertaking to tell a story, then there are certain skills that we must keep in mind or try to polish. When we deliberately tell stories, stories which are verbal, which we are sharing maybe with our friends, as Kamaini just said, we could sit and gossip and ask what's up, and then we tell a story. Or that we formally undertake to a session of storytelling. Or we create a story when we want to put a point of view across. As we've been told, the commercial stories are the most important stories of today because our economy and business and a nation's standing also depends on the stories. And that is why जब कभी किसी advertisement पे controversy हो जाती है, people don't agree with the narrative. And just last Eid, I think there was this problem when the um, daughter-in-law belongs to a different religion, and an ad which was supposedly made for creating communal harmony actually ended up disturbing communal harmony, and it had to be taken down. So what is important then in telling stories is keeping your audience in mind. Who are you going to tell this story to? And what does the audience think about certain issues? So at a very deep level, storytelling is an ideological exercise. It is, as Kamaini already told us, a political exercise. It's not all fun and pleasure. It's not just telling a story. There are ideologies inscribed and embedded in them. And when we come from the gendered perspective, often, very often, there is hidden patriarchy in the most innocuous stories. But I don't want to go into that today. What I want to do is maybe take you to your school and remember what our teachers told us about public speaking. Most of those rules of public speaking we need to implement in our storytelling. And if you have come to a story writing and storytelling workshop, all of you, I presume, are interested in telling stories in the written form or in the verbal form. I'm going to limit myself to the oral form, and Professor Him Chatterjee, who follows me, is going to talk about the visual form and the beautiful, beautiful form of paintings. All right. I wish we could have had music, and Mrityunjay sir is here, but he said he will do it in the next workshop. So perhaps that is an incentive for you to join the next workshop also. Anyway, there are so many storytellings. There are so many ways of telling a story. Many people say there are only 7 basic forms of stories. It doesn't matter because there are 7 billion different ways of telling those 7 stories. When you tell a story, you make it yours. The writer may have written it. Somebody else may have given it to you. Your dadi nani may have handed it down to you. But when you tell that story, or as Kamaini would say, if you narrate the story, at that moment in time, that story is yours. So for the first thing that we need to do is take ownership of that story. For that lamha, that story is yours. It's your possession, and you are the one who's going to share it with others. when we look at storytelling as performance, we are aiming at something. And that something is transforming the story as you tell it and transforming the audience who hears that story, and perhaps also transforming yourself as you undertake to narrate the story. Very basically, we all know that performance means the act of presenting, and storytelling means the activity of telling or writing stories. And when we look at stories, if we pare it down to the very bones, then we have the four P's, as you already know. And the four P's are people, place, plot, purpose. So, for a basic understanding of the story, we need to look at that story before we begin to narrate it. अगर आपने खुद एक कहानी लिखी है और उस कहानी को आप लोगों को पढ़ के या वैसे ही मेमोरी से मेमोरी हर समय चेंज करेगी नरेशन को हर समय हर वक्त even if you tell the same story 100 times it will be changed 100 times. There will never be a ditto storytelling unless it's a recorded piece. इवन इन रिकॉर्डिंग समटाइम्स वो पेस अलग हो जाती है कोई विजुअल छुप जाता है कुछ कट जाता है whatever so even in a mechanical recording of the story there might be certain changes that could take place and जब रिकॉर्डिंग की है उस लम्हे में भी जो कह रहा है और जो रिकॉर्ड हुआ है there will be so many variations in that also. So what I'm trying to get at is that storytelling is a dynamic process and jitna baar hum kahani kahenge utni baar hum kahani gadenge. So we need to but have a very basic understanding of who are the people in the story, which place is this happening, and what is the plot. Plot includes causality. We must understand the causality as also we must understand whether it is ironic, whether there is sarcasm, whether it's moving like yesterday Bande ma'am and Dimri ma'am told us, tragic hai, comic hai, expository hai, persuasive hai, argumentative hai. What is the way that plot has been structured and made, and how does it go forward? Figures of speech would be extremely important for us to understand how to tell the story. So if it's a metaphor, how will we tell it? If it is a simile, how will we tell it? If it is, let's say, reversal, then how will we do it? If it's a metonymy, then our voice will change. Our body language will also change as we pay attention to these little things in the story. And all these little things we will sort of remember and master if we read the story again and again and again till we have internalized it. Even if it's your own story जो आपने ही लिखी है, आपको अब telling के purpose से उसको दोबारा तिबारा चौबारा पढ़ना ही पड़ेगा. आपको देखना पड़ेगा कि बोलते वक्त आप किस चीज पे एम्फेसिस देंगे, किस चीज को ग्लॉस ओवर कर देंगे, किस चीज को समय कम होने पे छोड़ भी सकते हैं, कौन सी चीज बहुत ज्यादा है. If I trim it in the telling, it won't harm my story. These are conscious decisions that you will have to take as you undertake to narrate your story. And finally, the most important thing, what is the purpose of this story? ये purpose, ये कहानी after all करना क्या चाहती है? जिस तरह कमाइनी ने कहा उनके फादर और उनके परिवार कहानियां बताते थे अपने पाकिस्तान के डेज की, जो बाद में पाकिस्तान बना, अपने देश की, बाय देश आई मीन गांव, और अपनी जर्नी की, और फिर जो यहाँ आए एक दूसरे से उनको स्वैप कर रहे हैं स्टोरीज को, और वो सारी स्टोरीज एक क्यूमुलेटिव फॉर्म में एक कंपाउंड बन के हमारी कहानी हो गई. तो मेरी कहानी, दिवांकर की कहानी, गीतांजलि की कहानी, भागवत की कहानी, ये सब मिलकर हमारी कहानी कैसे हुई? Not by writing it, but by telling it. When we tell, we share. Writing, of course, but writing takes on another dimension, which is reflection and thinking. But when you are telling it, you are not giving too much time for reflection. However, little bit we must give. I'll come to that later. All right, so having set that stage, I want to first of all bring to your what should I say, bring to your mind the idea that when we are telling the story, there is a sensual experience. The senses are involved. So hearing, uh, talking, tactile, if you are in a physical situation, tactile, even evoking of the auditory or the or of taste or whatever. So sensual hai, that's important. Emotional hai, which is very important. Imaginative hai. Without that, you can't have a storytelling session. If your imagination and the teller's imagination, or if you're the teller, then the listener's imaginations are not fired up. If imagination is sleeping, if it is not working, if it's not in operation, then it's going to be a dead storytelling session. And finally, it should ultimately lead to thought. It should ultimately lead us to reflection on what we have heard. And so, when you pick up a story, you have to choose it very carefully because not all stories can be narrated verbally. Some stories require a person to sit down and reflect. But there are stories which can be read with a lot of emotion and drama. Drama is important to performance. You need to act out the story. You also need to make that story amenable to visualization. And what we're going to today is how to make visualization possible. How, if I think ek pari thi, when I say ek pari thi, are you able to imagine? Is it connecting you somewhere? Is it taking you somewhere? Are you now ready to respond to what is being said? Or like somebody said it yesterday, I think Dimri ma'am, once upon a time. Kya ho raha hai? The scene is being laid, which is beyond the temporal and the spatial, once upon a time. But if it says, Peshawar ki galiyon mein, there is a time, there is a place. When did that happen? हमने पढ़ी है वो कहानी कितने पाकिस्तान. We are transported back in time with that story. Pinjra, yes, all these powerful tamas अगर हम देखें, so it transports us to a particular period of time. और जब हम tamas कहानी को narrate करेंगे, तो उसके लिए हमें माइंडफुल होना पड़ेगा, हमें पूरा बैकग्राउंड पता होना चाहिए, हमें हिस्ट्री की समझ होनी चाहिए, हमें मेंटल डिस्टर्बेंस की समझ होनी चाहिए, हमें इंसानियत की समझ होनी चाहिए at a very deep level, because that's the purpose of that story, to illustrate and to illuminate a slice of history. It's not just another story about the partition. It is something deeper, which takes us to the collective unconscious of the human race, as it were. There are other stories. For example, I forget the name of the dog. Maybe some of you would be able to tell me. The story of the dog in Japan who kept waiting for his master, who happened to die while taking class in the big city. And he kept waiting outside the railway station for years, waiting for the master to come back, who never did. So if you look at that story, what is the purpose of that story? To bring out the pathos of this love that this animal had for the master and vice versa, and also to bring out the softer feelings of friendship, companionship, a sense of belonging, a family, uh, an animal and a human being making a family, to look beyond relationships which are based on give and take. And that story has to be told in a very different way from the way we would narrate tamas, because tamas will have an intensity. Hachiko, yes, Ujjwal, thank you so much. Hachiko, what a beautiful movie it was, and the book was even better. Yes, yes, thank you, Deepika, Nitin, yes. And so, yes, so you all know Hachika tugs at your heartstrings in a very different way from how tamas will tug at our heartstrings. Tamas will tug at our heartstrings. Both will break our hearts, by the way. Both stories will break our hearts, but Tamas will leave us thoughtful, reflective, and sad. Whereas Hachiko will break our heart, but leave us warm, leave us feeling more generous, more kind, will make us more compassionate. And therefore, you can't tell both the stories in the same way. The style of the story will depend on the story itself. So what is suited to the story? So सबसे पहले आपने चूज कर लिया कौन सी कहानी आप अच्छे से बता सकते हैं, जिसके लिए आप इक्विप्ड हैं according to your experiences, according to your own mindset, according to your attitude, according to if the story is ready made there for you, even if your own or somebody else's, then whether you at a deeper level are able to engage with that story. कोई ऐसी कहानी आप अच्छे से बता नहीं सकते जिससे आपके मेंटल एंड इमोशनल एंगेजमेंट नहीं है, तो चूज करना बड़े ध्यान से पड़ेगा। और फिर आपके जो skill hai ya aapki jo involvement with the story, is it adversarial or are you on the same page with the story? That will also alter the story as you tell it. So choose very wisely. In fact, choose select your stories and then put them aside, and then go back to the chosen story after a few hours or days, and then you might not agree with your first choice. So the second thing, once you have chosen the story, you've read it, you've understood it, you've decided यहाँ पे emphasis है, यहाँ पे नहीं है, ये pitch रहेगा, pace रहेगा, whatever. Those are the mechanics of it. If there's time, I can go over them very quickly later. But once you have done that, you need to practice. Simple as that. You need to practice. And you need to hear yourself. So, and you maybe need to see yourself also. So you could be a little vain, but you could stand in front of the mirror and see how you are emoting the story, because the story has to be emoted. That's important. Then you must have a presence when you start to tell the story. So as you walk into the room or as you walk onto the stage, you should have a charisma. And that charisma comes from where? It comes from confidence. And where did the confidence come from? It will come from your understanding of the story, the right choice that you made, and the practice that you did. So sometimes people use props, as ma'am yesterday told us. पाबूजी का कहानी है तो वो खोलते जाएंगे, कपड़े को खोलते जाएंगे, नरेट करते जाएंगे, या जैसे हिम सर करेंगे अभी विजुअल पेंटिंग होगी, वो दिखाते जाएंगे, बनती जाएगी। सैंड पेंटिंग्स लोग बनाते हैं, कहानी दर्शाते हैं। ऑलराइट, सो देयर आर सो मेनी डिफरेंट वेज। और आजकल तो डिजिटल स्टोरीज हैं, इंटरैक्टिव नॉवल के बारे में हमें कमाइनी ने अभी बताया है। Also people make stories on WhatsApp. Also people are doing digitally all kinds of stuff that people are doing and telling stories. But अगर आप in person बता रहे हैं story, तो आपकी एक presence होना बहुत जरूरी है. You have to exude that presence to the audience. So that's important. Why? Because only then will the audience believe in you. Otherwise, they will not engage with your story. So you need to be there. You need to, okay, I'm going to tell you a story of this ghost. हाँ, कहाँ था भाई ghost? शिमला में था, किसी भूतहा भवन में, हम बच्चे थे, हम पिकनिक के लिए गए, and suddenly there was this. And you narrate the story. So unless you are able to have that larger than life presence for that moment of time when you're telling the story, it's going to be difficult for the audience to engage with you. So effective storytelling also will involve our understanding of human emotions, and we know that most of the time there are six basic emotions that are referred to. If you would like to share आपकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग से कौन सी है वो छह बेसिक इमोशंस कौन सी हैं? Anyone? Okay, let me tell you then. There's anger, there's disgust, there's fear, there's happiness, there's sadness, and then there's surprise. Surprise बहुत important because human beings are always curious to know what they don't know. So surprise is very, very important emotion that keeps us going. These are the emotions that motivate us, that make us do things. And story में ये छह emotions कहीं ना कहीं किसी ना किसी रूप में हमें जरूर मिलेंगी, और हमें इन emotions को समझना जरूरी है. कहाँ से आती हैं ये feelings, कहाँ कहाँ reside करती हैं, किस तरह इवोक होती हैं. अगर मैं हैप्पी हूं तो क्या हूं? क्या मुझसे कोई प्यार करता है इसलिए मैं खुश हूं? क्या मेरा रिजल्ट अच्छा आया, क्या मैं इसलिए खुश हूं? या आज दिन बड़ा खूबसूरत है इसलिए मैं खुश हूं? Whatever it is, how did you get to this state of happiness, or this feeling of happiness? And in India, of course, we talk of the rasas. कितने रस होते हैं? आठ नाट्य शास्त्र से आ रहे हैं, और एक नवा रस हमने ऐड किया, अभिनव गुप्त. So शांत रस. So we have 9 rasas, and all these rasas we need to be aware of. And ये तो सभी को आते हैं, श्रृंगार, हास्य, विभत्स, whatever. We know them. इन रसों के बारे में हमें जानकारी होना बहुत जरूरी है, बिकॉज कहानी में रस है, उस रस को आपने कन्वे करना है, और उस रस को कन्वे करने के लिए कुछ चीजें होती हैं जो कनेक्टिंग टिश्यूज होते हैं स्टोरी में, उन पे हम एम्फोसिस नहीं देंगे. ऑलराइट, लेकिन जहां ये रस उभर के आ रहा है, कोई भी रस, उस पे हम एम्फोसिस देंगे, उस पे हमारी पिच हायर जाएगी, उस पे हमारा टेम्पो या बहुत बढ़ जाएगा या स्लो होगा, लेकिन जिस तरह हम बात कर रहे थे उससे अलग होगा. ओनली देन विल दैट रस or that emotion emerge out, stand out for the people to see. For example, एक story है मुल्कराज आनंद की, Parrot in the Cage. I don't know if how many of you have read it. It's a beautiful story again about a woman, old woman, being feeling homeless, and not homeless, sorry, feeling alien because she's also suffered partition, and being lonely. And the only person she has with her is the one parrot in her cage. So she carries the parrot everywhere if she has to go out, and carries the cage with her. And in the house, the parrot knows her name, and the only thing that the parrot keeps saying, and that which makes her feel wanted, loved, belonging, etc., although it irritates her, is Rukmaniye, oh Rukmaniye. And after every little while, the parrot will go on, Rukmaniye, oh Rukmaniye. And she will keep saying, keep quiet, aise shor machata hai, and she'll keep conversing with the parrot, feed it chilies and whatever, walk with it, and sometimes get very annoyed and chadar dal degi uske pinjre pe, go to sleep now, stop bothering me. So she has an intense relationship with that parrot, and the parrot says nothing at all except Rukmaniye, oh Rukmaniye. And that refrain tells us the life of that woman, in so many aspects of that woman, and how that woman still has the energy to live at this old age, at this displacement, at this being left alone, at this having lost everything, and not only her family or her property in Pakistan, but also the mahalla, the women of the mahalla, the talks that they used to have, the foods that they had to share, and all of it boils down to just this one Rukmani. And that's where we see the power of just one phrase that becomes central to the entire story and to us understanding the entire story. So the emotions of the story are things to be highlighted. Of course, we know that rus can only be suggested. Rus cannot really be described, because rus kahan se aata hai? The rus comes out of our contemplation, out of our, it is abstract, but it's coming from within us, from our basic feelings. And when we feel it, we know we are feeling it, but there's no way to describe it, not at all. But agar wo ras इवोक हो जाता है, इवोक हो जाता है, ऑपरेट करने लग जाता है, then you will be transformed. Then the story is transformative. Then you, what has happened in the story is going to stay in your mind. And that is the purpose of storytelling, to make it rememberable. वो कोई बताता है कहानी तो बहुत अच्छी तरह से, तो हमें वो कहानी बहुत लम्हे समय तक याद रहती है. All right. I'm looking at the time. It's almost 3:30. I want to ask Sapna, if you're there, Sapna, how much time will you give me?
You can take 20 more minutes.
Okay, thank you. All right. So let's do an exercise if anybody would be interested. How would you say, I hate you? How would you say this phrase, I hate you? Would anybody like to participate?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Rajan.
First, I would like to know what should be the intensity? What is the...
Yes, I understand your question, but I'm leaving it to you.
Okay, okay. I hate you.
All right, so quite intense, right? I hate you. Would anyone else like to try? I hate you.
Ma'am, can we use some other words as well to describe the same emotion?
Okay, why not, Bhagwat? That's interesting. Let's do that.
I want to reach down my guts. Oh, just 1 second. I'll have to write it down.
Okay, you write it down. Would anyone else like to try in the meanwhile?
Can we add an element of disgust in it?
Why not?
Oh, how I hate you.
Very convincing, Sapna. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Would anyone else like to try?
You know what? I hate you.
Anrup, would you say that again, please? I lost it.
You know what? I hate you. I just hate.
Oh, that's so lovely. All right, that's great. We are waiting for Bhagwat.
I feel like reaching down my guts and ripping them out while looking at you.
And and just add the three words there. You've
And
described it now.
I hate you.
I hate you. All right. So I hate you. How I hate you. I want to reach down and pull out your guts. I hate you. And then Anurup gave us a very gentle, I hate you. All right. What was this exercise aimed at?
I'm sorry, ma'am. It wasn't me, I think. It was, I think, Pooja.
Oh, Pooja. All right. Okay,
Yeah.
Pooja. Yeah. So if it is, thank you for that, Anru. So if we look at I hate you, just three words that everyone has interpreted it in a different way. So coming from intense hatred to very graphic hatred, to a sense of disgust, and to a very gentle hatred. Sometimes I hate you can be very ironic, because you could be meaning I love you. And so that I hate you would be another way of saying that. So when we look at this emotions, हमने एक ही लिया अभी. When we look at that emotion, you understand there would be so many different ways in which you could be doing that. What you choose or how you choose to do it is dependent on the story, of course, but also the storyteller. It will depend on when I said I hate you in a void, कोई background नहीं दिया आपको, कोई setting नहीं दी. So when I just said I hate you, it was your mind which interpreted the phrase. इट वॉज योर माइंड. जब स्टोरी होगा तो उसका कॉन्टेक्स्ट होगा, लेकिन फिर भी आपकी पर्सनालिटी, आपके एक्सपीरियंस उस हेट्रेड को, आई हेट यू को इंटरप्रेट करेंगे. So the same story told by Rajan or Sapna or Pooja or Bhagwat will interpret this hatred differently. Even though in the story, we know Derrida, we know Bath, the word hate is used. But that word hate takes on so many different functions within the context of the story and the matrix of the story, but also in interaction with my life and yours. And so that hate will generate different intensities, different feelings, and different ways of delivery. So जब हम मैं ये कह रही हूं कि आपकी फिलॉसफी आपके एक्सपीरियंसेस को डिसाइड करेंगे, let's look at what benefits the stories give us. They give us diverse experiences. अभी हमें 4-5 लोगों ने बताया diverse experience. Then stories जैसे कमाइनी ने हमें समझाया, well-being, relaxation, politics, thoughts, feelings, imagination, creativity जो मैम्स ने कल बताया, and जो इन 2 दिनों में आपने दिखाया, listening skills. How much can you listen? How much listening can be done, and how listening is done? How, in what way? Daydreaming and listening, because कितने हजार बार हम daydream करते हैं, कमाई ने हमें बताया. तो इस वक्त भी हो सकता है कुछ लोग daydream कर रहे हो और आधा ही सुन रहे हो, whether it's active listening, whether it is disinterested listening or whatever. So if we really pay attention, so तरह तरह के listeners हैं वहां पे, तरह तरह के listeners, और उन सारे listeners को आपने grab करना है, और grab करने के लिए to act out से better कोई तरीका हमारे पास नहीं है. So would you like to share your experience, any experience that comes to your mind, which you can narrate to the group if you want? Would anybody like to share anything in the form of an anecdote or a memory or an incident with the group, and we'll take it from there. Nobody? Okay, I will respect that. Anyway, if we share our experiences, has anybody met a ghost ever? Has anyone here met a ghost? Do you believe in ghosts?
I cannot say that I believe in ghosts, but I've seen something that I cannot explain. I mean, there is no reasonable explanation behind what I saw.
Oh, would you like to tell us about it?
Sure. So, um, I live in Nainital, and my hometown is Pithoragarh, but I live in Nainital. So, the room that I had rented, it's just right next to the graveyard, an old graveyard there. So, one night, I think it was, yeah, it's the 4th of November 2019. I remember the date clearly because the next day I had to submit my dissertation. So, what happened that night was I was um, walking outside. There was some network problem and there was no internet. So, I was using my internet on the phone outside my room, and I could see the graveyard, which is now just a parking spot. The graves are still there, but people just use this for parking their cars and stuff. So what I saw was, the cars, they have got this alarm thing when anybody tries to hit the car or anything like this. So one of the cars there, the alarms, they went off, and the lights inside the car, it got switched on, and then it was making that sound of the alarm for at least 10, 12 seconds, and then it stopped. So there are also very huge pine trees there. So I thought something might have fallen on the car, or something else might have caused it. But then after a minute, then the alarm, it went off again, and this time I saw something shadowy or dark So without opening the door of the car, it went inside the car and it moved from the passenger seat to the driving seat, and then it exited the car. And then after 10 or 12 more seconds, the alarm it stopped.
Wow, that's quite an experience, I must say. Oh, that's wonderful. Would anybody like to respond to the anecdote, to this incident that Bhagwat has shared with us? No?
May I?
Yeah, yes, of course.
Actually, I'm quite surprised how he stood his ground after all that experience.
That's true. Very brave, Bhagwat, very brave.
Very, very brave of him
I
to
was
having
more scared of something else. Actually, I hadn't followed MLA 8th edition in submitting my dissertation. I was also on the phone talking to one of my mates
Okay.
regarding how to submit it. And the next day was the last day for submitting the dissertation. So, yeah, I don't get scared easily in this.
because it really requires guts to be standing there after all that experience.
How interesting. मतलब PhD का भूत ज़्यादा बड़ा था
बड़ा था.
जो असली भूत सामने दिख रहा था उससे. That's really interesting. Yeah, we've had that booth sitting on our shoulders. All of us, or some of us are still. हमारे अभी भी विक्रम और बेताल वाला situation है कुछ ने बेताल उतार दिया है, भगवत ने भी उतार दिया, thankfully. This is such an interesting story. You know, when people tell us ghost stories, सबसे पहले हम सब लोग ये जरूर कहते, I don't believe in ghosts. But this is what I saw, or this is what happened to me. You know, we don't want to believe in ghosts, but ghosts कहीं तो हमारे subconscious में हैं, वो exist करते हैं. अब वो memory से आ रहे हैं या dream से आ रहे हैं या कहाँ किसे कहानियां बचपन में दादी नानी ने बतेरी से सुनाई थी हमें, और कभी कभी ऐसा हो जाता है जैसे भागवत के साथ हुआ कि उसको कुछ दिखा. All right, and very real था, material था, क्योंकि वो कार का अलार्म बज रहा था and suddenly वो एंटर हुआ और फिर स्लाइड हुआ और फिर बाहर चला गया. एंड दैट होल मोशन, यू नो, मैं पीएचडी के बारे में सोच रहा था. आई वाज टॉकिंग टू माय फ्रेंड, कैसे करना है कल, सो टायर्ड, व्हाट हैज टू बी, हो जाएगा कि नहीं. एंड सडनली द अलार्म रैंग एंड यू लुक, क्या है, कौन है. And then and Nainital, like Shimla, you know, at night can be little very frightening. And so what happens is, who's that? You forget to breathe. You forget to breathe for a while. और गया. And then you don't know what to do because क्या ये हुआ? Should I tell my friend? Should I not tell my friend? PhD तो भूल गया उस मिनट तक, थोड़ी देर के लिए, because how to process this, because जब PhD की बात कर रहे हैं आप बिल्कुल rational level पे हैं, practical level पे हैं, how to submit, what to do, how to go, where to go, and then this crazy thing right in the middle of nowhere. और memory में फिर बाद में हो सकता है पता नहीं था कि नहीं था, dog तो नहीं था कहीं, कोई घुस गया, क्या पता कोई सो ही रहा हो अंदर. And then you begin all the rationalizations. But for the moment that you are telling that story, मैं जा रहा था, मेरा कल PhD का submission था, and I was talking to my friend on the phone. And, you know, suddenly this car started sounding the alarm. And I looked, and पता नहीं क्या है. And then I saw a figure, and then I saw, पता नहीं क्या था. I don't know. And then, as you see what you have done, Bhagwat has done, he has taken from us our willing suspension of disbelief. We don't believe in ghosts. We are all PhDs or hoping to be PhDs, or we are grown-up adults and we live in the 21st century. And how can we believe in ghosts? But जब नागिन फिल्म चल रही थी ना थिएटर्स में, बहुत पहले शिमला में एक रिट्स थिएटर वहां पे चल रही थी, बहुत से लोग अपने पांव कुर्सी पे रख के बैठते थे, इवन दो नोइंग कि यहाँ पे नाग नहीं आ सकता, पर फिर भी इवन वी नो, अगर हम ऐसे ही फ्रेम ऑफ माइंड में जा रहे हो कहीं पे और अचानक लाइट चला जाए, तो फिर पेड़ की टहनी भी हिलेगी तो भूत ही लगेगी. So what Bhagavad has done very effectively for us, has brought a willing suspension of disbelief. This is very important. Kyun? In that anecdote, in that story, to increase the tension, to infuse drama. And so the listeners are waiting for that transcendent moment. And then the tension is released, because PhD ki tension zyada badi thi. And so you come back to your former state of mind. And that's a very important skill when you're telling stories. You need to come back to the normal. Okay, so you increase the tension, you increase the imagination, you used your pitch, you used your volume, you used your pace and rhythm to show that moment, and then you go back to your regular style. And that's how a story will catch the attention, and people will not really disengage and disbelieve very readily. So this is important. स्टोरी टेलिंग ट्रेडिशंस बहुत हैं भारत में, तो बहुत ही ज्यादा है, असंख्य है. सो वी लर्न फ्रॉम देम, किस तरह कभी गाकर कभी हिलकर, या बॉडी मूवमेंट इज सो इम्पोर्टेंट, गो बैक, हाँ ठीक है, एंड देन क्या हुआ, and all those movements, and you talk with your hands are very important. भूत है नहीं है. And that's how your story will gain the engagement of the listeners. So dialogue पे बहुत ध्यान देना naturally हमें, क्योंकि हमें emotion create करना है. Yeah, if we go back to this actor April Armstrong, she says, when you're acting, you're emoting a lot of feelings. Your character is feeling this and feeling that. And in storytelling, you are telling what the character is feeling. You are not feeling it. You tell what your character is feeling. You are not so. Whether we believe in ghosts or we don't believe in ghosts, it is immaterial. It really doesn't matter, because हमें तो character क्या feel कर रहा है, उसको हमने convey करना है. वो hatred feel कर रहा है या hatred feel नहीं कर रहा है, वो हमें बताना है. हमें और कुछ नहीं बताना, हमें तो यही बताना है. और अपनी फीलिंग्स नहीं बतानी. We don't have to do that. Now, next thing that I'd like to tell you is this. When you engage your audience, because the audience is the my बाप of the storyteller, okay? उसको खुश करना है हमको, उसका अटेंशन हमें चाहिए. So we need to engage with the audience. तो जब आप स्टोरी टेलिंग सेशन शुरू करेंगे, सबसे पहले you need to interact with your audience on informally or formally, whatever, पर story एकदम से शुरू नहीं करेंगे. You set the stage for it, right? So you interact, you maybe ask a question, but that question should ultimately link to your story, or a rhetorical question maybe, or you make a statement, क्योंकि कोई तो hook चाहिए, कोई तो bait चाहिए. वो मछली है listeners, हमें उनको कांटा डाल के अपनी तरफ खींच के लाना है. So you do that, right? Informal not informal interaction with your audience before you actually begin to tell the story, and then you embrace the whole of your audience. Storytelling में कई बार लोग एक ही जगह focus करते हैं. You need to interact, and so embrace your audience. Put them all here. All of them are here. Come close. I'm going to tell you a story. And so, how will you do that? Obviously with your eye contact, but also turn your body towards different sections of your audience, and so everybody feels that, yeah, you are talking to them. So remember, because sometimes story इतनी fascinating होती है, हम उस story में खुद ही खो जाते हैं, and we forget कि हमारे listeners हैं. तो listeners को center में रखना बहुत जरूरी है. Then you build the scene, because storytelling is an immersive experience. So they should feel like they are there in the story. Rukmani, oh, we are sitting there watching the parrot and Rukmani getting irritated with the parrot, but also happy कि parrot है, कोई तो है उसका दुनिया में. She is not just alone. There is one parrot. और थोड़ी थोड़ी देर बाद रुक्मणी goes. She's brought back to reality. She's brought back to the day. Okay. Otherwise वो पिछले दिनों की यादों में खोई रहती है. Remember that. Remember this. Remember that. The parrot is grounding her to her reality, and also making her feel loved and feel affection. So you make it an immersive experience. You know, it's so nice that Chatterjee sir is going to come after me. You have to paint a picture, and they should be able to imagine. The audience should be able to imagine कि ये हो रहा है, एक लड़का जा रहा है रात के समय फोन पे बात करते हुए, and suddenly the alarm goes off. कोई तो है, कोई तो है. क्या हो रहा है? है नहीं है? All those things that your language बहुत carefully choose करना है, because you know when you are trying to make it immersive, everything should lead back to the story. Then you build the tension and release the tension periodically. Now सारा ये एक पिच पे नहीं बोल देना कि कुछ हो ही ना, तो फोन पे बात कर रहा था और उसके बाद फिर ओह शायद गलत फहमी हुई है, मे बी आई एम हाइपर एक्साइटेड, इस स्टेट में तब भूत भात दिख रहे हैं, मे बी दे आर नॉट रियली देयर. And so focus on what is important. Next point, focus on what is important in the story and lend your intensity of voice, of pace, of pitch and volume on that. I can see Sapna, I got the hint. Then also gauge your audience. Gauge your audience means that you must keep your hands on the pulse of the audience. Are they drifting apart? Are they listening? Are they with me? Generate ho raha hai wo bhav ki nahi ho raha hai? All that we will pay attention to. And finally, when you reach the conclusion, you know, you've put it all, through all this, then towards the end, give it a closure. लोगों को पता चलना चाहिए कि कहानी खत्म हो गई है. अब कई बार ऐसे होता है, what is this? End कैसे हुआ? खत्म हो गई. कई दफा हम पूछते हैं, बात खत्म हो गई. So that closure has to come. And how do you do that? As a skill, you slow down towards the end. You slow down. You come back to the easy narrative style and you lower your voice just a bit so that people mentally who were so involved, they also begin to relax. So having said that, body language and voice का मैं आपको सबको पता ही है, facial control होना चाहिए, gesture, expression, emotional coloring जो है वो clearly reflect होनी चाहिए. ये सब मैं आपके साथ नहीं करना चाहती, पर ये जरूर कहना चाहती हूँ कि डिफरेंट कैरेक्टर्स को डिफरेंट वॉइस देना जरूरी है. तो अगर दो कैरेक्टर्स हैं, आई एम शेयरिंग दैट स्टोरी बट आई डोंट हैव द टाइम टू डील इट टू रीड इट विद यू. आई डोंट नो वेदर यू ऑल कैन वॉच इट. आर यू बीइंग एबल टू सी इट, the story?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yeah. So if you say ghost, because you said ghost, so I opened a ghost story. The old lady calling out Shamsher Singh, open the door. Open the door, I say, and let me in. Needless to say, Shamsher Singh kept the door firmly closed. And he returned to his village at the first opportunity, etc. So when we look at this story, शमशेर सिंह की वॉइस अलग होगी, और जो वो है लेडी है who's supposed to be haunting that house, her bungalow, उसकी वॉइस अलग होगी. ये जो बच्चे गए हैं पिकनिक मनाने, इनकी वॉइस अलग होगी. एंड सो यू हैव 6 कैरेक्टर्स अगर, और एक बॉन्ड भी है, रस्किन बॉन्ड की स्टोरी है, पिकनिक एट फॉक्सबर्न. तो बॉन्ड की स्टोरी भी है, 6-7 कैरेक्टर्स. यू विल हैव टू मेक 7 different voices, which is not to say, only the accent or the pitch changes or the way you speak, fast or slow, that will change. Or whether it will go deep for the adults, will it go a little shrill for the children, etc. So वो सब emotions के साथ वो सब भी आपको characters के लिए लेना ही पड़ेगा. And uh, sometimes you can even not read he said she said, because आपके voice से ही पता चल जाएगा कि you are now that character, or now this character is speaking, or the other character is speaking. So my advice, not advice, I'm sorry to say use that word, what I would like to say is that it's a dynamic form. So use the space also dynamically, use your body dynamically, and most important, use your voice to convey the emotions and the strength of the story. Okay, for example, how many sweets did you eat today? Only two. How many sweets did you eat today? Only two. How many sweets did you eat today? Only two. And the same dialogue can be told in 1,000 different ways. So if the Arabian Nights